Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Artcasters number 152. And this is probably going to be a pretty packed show today because Josh just got back from Adobe Max. I and our guest tonight had Phoenix Design Week. So we thought it'd be a good idea to talk about design conferences. And I mean, there's just a lot of stuff to talk about. So we might even run into next week because another host that we have pretty often, Corey Kerr, he just went to Vid Summit.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you talked to Corey. I think he's in the chat, but I don't know. Maybe next week we can even touch on that a little more. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. So anyway, you know who I am because you're on my channel, I assume. You can find me at circworks.com also. I got a new website up. And then my co-host is always Joshua Kimball. Hey, Josh, how are you?
How's it going? I feel on fire from Adobe Max, and I wasn't sure going into it because it's a pretty big ask to have the boss like fork out the cash to do it. And I just feel fuel, like just pure fiery fuel from it. And I think you guys had Drapeland speak too, so it's like I'm sure like we'll get into that, but he provides a fire. Anyhow, you can check out my work at quarterlystories.com. You can also check it out on topis.io by searching for Quarterly Stories and subscribing for it there. And you can also check out my work at joshuakimball.com and on the YouTube's lurking around Scott's channel occasionally as well. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, cool. So like I said, Phoenix Design Week and the conference that went along with it was this past week or sort of week and a half, 2 weeks ago. It kind of ran the whole week. So I guess it wrapped up last Friday. You know, I met a lot of cool people. One of the cool people that I met was our guest, Steffan Stewart. And first of all, just kind of introduce him, and then he can kind of tell you a little more what he does. But so the beginning, the kickoff party, there was this, we had like this poster slam contest that I entered, and I saw this one awesome poster. And for some reason, it wasn't in the finalists, but it was probably one of my, if not my favorite. And it was one, and it tied in really well with the branding and everything. Because the poster I did was just one that I had, and I had some people telling me to enter, so I just kind of gave one that I thought sort of fit the theme. But this one really fit the theme. It was all the design aesthetic that they were using for the conference. It had Drapeland, and it was just really cool illustration. And I was wondering, I said, I want to try to find out who did this. So then in the Drapeland workshop, this guy comes next to me, the guy who's sitting across from Josh on the, or not physically, but in the little box there, sits next to, I think you had did you have one with you that you got signed by Drapeland, or a couple, right?
Yeah, I had the full stack. So I designed them for, so we did like the raffle at the end of the event. So I'm part of the board of directors of AIGA Arizona, which organized Phoenix Design Week. And so it was just a fun little, Drapeland's coming. It's a big deal. Right. I'm just going to have fun and make some posters for him, and we'll raffle them off, give them to the directors who put the event together. And we had him sign all of them. So it was really cool.
Oh, you had him sign all of them. Oh,
yeah, I signed all of them, and then we raffled. I think we raffled one, and then I gifted all of the others to the board members who put the event together. So we all got some really cool signed Drapeland custom gear. So
that's awesome. So Steffan sits next to me, and then I remarked on the poster, and it was just like, yeah, and because throughout that whole week, I kept seeing stuff, and I'm like, oh, I got to see who did that. There was another situation at the kickoff party where they had this. You were there, right?
Yeah, the kickoff party.
Yeah. So did you do anything on the big on the tractor trailer thing?
I did not. No. Okay.
So I went and painted a robot, and they had like. They didn't have really, they had these thick brushes and everything. So I did the best I could, and I walked away, and I'm like, well, it's okay. But somebody really showed me up because somebody painted like a Mona Lisa. Did you see that?
I didn't actually.
Oh.
I was in and out, so I didn't get
Okay.
to see it up close. But
Yeah.
that's
Somebody pointed to Mona Lisa, and I was talking to somebody, and there's this guy, and he kind of walks by, and I think is the person he was with. I don't know, it was his girlfriend or whatever. She's kind of nudging him, and he said that he did that. So I was like, oh man, that's cool. So I just kept meeting all these cool people that did all this cool stuff that I was into. And then at the closing party, I was talking to Steffan, and we were talking about, they also have this, in the conference, they have this table, and it's like the best of Phoenix. So you enter different, it's different graphic design, wherever it is, whether it's illustration or graphic design or whatever you're doing. And I was remarking on this, somebody had done these Pokemon. They took Pokemons, but they made logos out of them. And I voted on it, because you vote on what you like. And then and then Steffan's like, oh yeah, I did that too. So I'm like, oh man, this guy's awesome. So I gotta get him on the show and everything. So anyway, so that's kind of the story how we met. So but I don't know a whole lot about you other than kind of what we've already talked about. So why don't you kind of introduce yourself to everyone and kind of tell people what you do, and then after that we can get into the topic.
Yeah, of course. My name is Steffan Stewart. I'm a graphic designer and illustrator, brand specialist, if you will. I've been designing my entire life, always been illustrating and drawing, always that dorky kid in the back of the room drawing dragons and anime stuff in class. Just always had a passion for it. Ended up going into the creative industry, started freelancing a couple years ago, and ended up building my own design agency here in Phoenix called Bridge. And on the side, I just like to work on a lot of fun projects like the Pokemon project. I now teach graphic design at Grand Canyon University, just as a fun little side hobby. I have one class, can't really do much more than that. But yeah, so that's kind of what I do, what I'm about, and what I love. If you want to check out my work, my personal Instagram is Steffan Stewart Design. My name's spelled a little weird, so Steffan Stewart. Probably be the only person you'll find. And then my team's website is bridgephx.com.
Yeah, and both of those links are in the description of this video. So I definitely want to talk to Steffan more, but I think Josh is probably chomping at the bit, because he's just fresh off of Adobe Max. And so also the thing Steffan has in common with both of us is that Josh has also attended Adobe Max, and Steffan has attended Adobe Max and Phoenix Design Week. So he's been to both of these things. So he's got, I think, a little more experience, and you've done it. You've done Phoenix Design Week before. So for Josh and I think I know for me, this is my first conference, and I think for you too, Josh, right?
Yeah, definitely first design conference. Yeah. So
Steffan's the expert here, so that's why we had him on. But I do want to kind of go back to Josh for a bit and kind of get his takeaway from Adobe Max.
Oh man, there's a lot. I mean, there's a couple things that, and I touched on this a little bit on 48 Hour Art Check, but there's like just endless content. So it's like, I feel like I'll be mining it for a while. One thing I'll say just as kind of like a warning is, like, I wouldn't head to Adobe Max to like learn crazy skills if you're a veteran. Like having come out of like freelancing for like 15 years and art directing and stuff, it's like there wasn't a lot about Illustrator or InDesign or Photoshop that I was learning that was like brand new. Some good refreshers, some cool updates. Like hopefully everybody here has updated their Photoshop, because you can now just go Control Z and it'll just continually go back. They got rid of the Alt, which literally led to like this massive applause in the room. I think it got a bigger applause than any like guest celebrity. As did, you can now double click. Like, I don't know why you'd be doing type in Photoshop, but if you're doing type in Photoshop, you can now double click your type layer and it's editable. It's
I do that for the thumbnail for Artcasters, but other than that, not a lot of type in Photoshop. But
yeah,
that will come in handy for that. So.
Oh yeah, and I mean I've done it occasionally, and it's usually for like thumbnails and stuff. But it's just definitely a nice thing that has it. Like once again, it's like they're kind of starting to streamline like the two programs even more together. There's a lot of like stuff coming down the pipe that's really exciting.
I saw those new brushes that Kyle Webster introduced, where the watercolor and the
it's insane.
oil brush.
Yeah, and I keep forgetting the program that those were.
Something like Gemini, some Project Gemini or something.
Yeah, I think it's called Gemini, and it looks amazing. And I instantly saw that and thought my wife would just like have a heart attack, like, because she loves doing watercolors traditionally, and the like adapting a watercolor style digitally is like one of the few things that you just can't get that wash right. And then they're showing it, and it's got like organic, just water pooling at the bottom.
Live brushes, I think what they're calling it, because it actually after you lift your stylus up, it's still kind of like the watercolor is still kind of seeping in, and you can use you can adjust your opacity down to nothing and just use water. And same thing with the oil brush. You paint it. They just mix. I mean, that really looks cool.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And then I'm just gonna kind of really briefly touch on it because I want to hear Steffan's stuff as well. I want to make sure I'm pronouncing that right.
No.
Okay, I'm not.
It's all good. It's Steffan, but I get that.
Steffan. Okay, no, I'm gonna repeat it like until Steffan I get it right
from time to time. So it's good, man.
No
worries.
So I want to hear your take on it because you probably have way more experience, especially running a design agency and stuff like with that. And your take on it, I think, will be really fascinating. So I'm just gonna really try to just breeze through it. So they have this thing called sneaks where they show you stuff that's just being developed. And I had this mix of feeling watching it, which I think everybody has, where you're like, this is so cool. And then it's like, holy crap, half of us are out of a job. Because it's like we're working on this way to automate things. And they did this demo of like something they're doing for, I think, Premiere. And it'll be available in After Effects as well, in theory. Like some of this stuff may never actually see the light of day. But they click like 4 points on a human figure, or actually I think it was a horse. They used like 4 points around the horse. And then it just creates an auto mask, which is like a pretty accurate auto mask. But then they use a heel brush to kind of mask, like fix it up. And then they hit play and it tracks. It auto masks an entire group of footage in real time, and it's really impressive. And there were some sections where they just delete out part of the screen and it would auto fill it, which all of us who've dealt with auto filling know is like you still end up having to go in there and really customize it anyway. But it just did it for like the entire footage, and there's little things like that are going to be game changing. So that was, interesting and inspiring. But the people that really, I mean, there's a through line that stuck with me from it, which is to have a side hustle, and to really just be persistent with your side hustle as an artist. Even if you're doing stuff for pay, that's your own stuff. You should be doing stuff for passion. And that went from like people who were like Questlove, who's like the drummer from the Roots, and like Ron Howard, and like these like incredibly like people who are where people are striving to get, and all of them were like, I attribute like my passion thing to like what keeps me going. So I think that's anyhow. So doing art for love, I think, seems like a big side narrative that just stretches across everybody's thing.
So as somebody who already has a pretty big side hustle and does all those personal projects, what would you do differently?
Well, so like coming out of it, it's weird because it's like I have this mix of like I want to do a million things because there's a lot of stuff other than that I got out of it. But I would say just really doubling down and continuing it with vigor, because that's the kind of thing that leads to people having better, more fulfilling careers, and so, yeah, I mean, I don't know if that answers, but that's kind of the gist of it from what I gathered. I think everybody would come out of there taking away a lot of different things, but I was mixed with like, I want to, rejuvenate my team at work and just at where I art direct. I came up with some really good strategies just listening to ideas from some of the top minds in design. The people who stuck with me the most, no surprise, were like the two people who were kind of why I even was interested in going, which was Jessica Hische, who had just an amazing talk about work-life balance. I'm sure the whole thing's probably up on YouTube. But it's really compelling, and it really kind of demystifies the nature of like a culture that's like encouraging people to work 80 hours a week. And when they introduce themselves, say what they do, as opposed to like who they are, or like, I'm a father. Like that could be a good starting point instead of being like, I'm an illustrator designer, and kind of her transition from being the person who'd be like, I am, a lettering artist, I am a designer, I'm a typographer, to being more like explaining what she's about before explaining what she does for a living, and kind of trying to organize things so that she's working less and more effectively, and allows for more time to kind of pursue passions and stuff. So it was a really encouraging talk, and it's really kind of hit home because it's Jessica Hische. She's like one of the people who got me into like switching from just kind of being locked into illustration. And then when I do illustration, I just do like cartoon type, like retro comic book type. And I was really like into like old vintage ads and stuff like that. But I hadn't really like fully explored type until I really saw some of the stuff she was doing. And then it was like that on top of being a fan of Chris Ware, I was like, okay, this is something I should delve into, learning how to do like custom lettering. And so like for me, that was really brilliant to hear. And then like, I guess the last part I'll say is just Aaron Draplin was like, I mean, the guy is a firehouse, and was super encouraging and interesting, and really puts like the right kind of blue collar perspective to what we do. Because a lot of people, when they approach design, kind of approach it from like a white collar angle of like, here's why you should pay me more. Like, here's why you won't get what I'm talking about because I'm using terminology you don't understand. And I went to art school, whereas Draplin, and I think he's done this pretty successfully, he kind of more, at least, in his lecture, was talking about kind of approaching clients from a more human standpoint, where you're trying to kind of empathize with the fact that not everybody's job is working on like a really awesome computer that can run these amazing programs. So a lot of people don't even know how to open like a group PDF. And I don't want to do too much of his content too, because I guarantee it's out there. You can probably look that up on YouTube as well. But it was just super inspiring. And, he also went over failures and things that, like he had a graveyard of logos. I don't know if he might have done the same talk for you guys, but he had an entire graveyard of logos that were rejected that were brilliant. Like a lot of them, the guy's like a powerhouse. Like I wish I had like a 10th of the ability to knock things out that he does with such simplicity, but just expertise. And yet, it was really encouraging. I mean, he was just kind of basically saying we should be proud to be making money with mouse clicks. And, and it's true. I mean, it's totally true. Like what we do is, it can be stressful and it can be deadline driven. And like the higher up you go, the more frustrating it can get. 'Cause you can, then you have to deal with delegation and like, trying to keep people inspired and all of that. But at the end of the day, we are like doing a pretty cool job, and it's a pretty cool skill we've acquired that not like everybody gets to do. And so there was that, and then just the kind of punk rock and roll vibe that he brings to a talk. It was wonderful. And then, I mean, I could go on. There was just too much. There was too much. It was cool to hear people's biographies, and you know, I came out of there just basically feeling like a lot of the fire I felt when I first wanted to get my first design gig, which is a hard thing to replicate. Like that kind of just like crazy, like, you know, work and try anything kind of approach. So I really encourage people to do it just for like a reinvigoration of you know, like that. So that's all on the design stuff. And then there's free beer the entire event, and it's everywhere. So you're just walking and it's like a beer here, a beer there. That's great. And a variety. So it wasn't like Coors. It was like, you know, Stone IPA, Stone Mountain IPA. Like, I mean, that was excellent. There's really great food. It was a little crazy for networking. So I think that would be probably a pretty big difference with probably how it is at the conference you went to, because I don't know if there were 18,000 people.
No, and
there were 500.
Yeah.
So it's a little more, you know, good for networking. Whereas this event, you could get a lot of networking in, but you'd have to really be like just like balls out, just walking up to tons of people and just hit or miss, kind of hoping you're talking to the right one. Because like I mean, you know, they had a stadium Beck concert and the stadium was pretty full. So it's all designers, which I will say for just a fun time out is great. Like artists are such good people. You just like, I even did an experiment at one point and turned to my friend and was just like, this is the kind of crowd that, you know, I could probably just randomly high five people and I'll get high fives. And I literally did that to like 80 people. And then like one guy was like, nah. And I was like, I don't know. That's pretty good odds. You wouldn't get that on the street, you know? And these are people from like all over the world, and they're all there to kind of have a good time and learn and kind of create and make stuff. And that's I mean, that in itself, just being in a body of people who all have that, like they're all hustling, they're all making it. If they're not making it, they're like chomping at the bit to make it. It's a good reminder and like a good, I don't know, like energy. So it was just an excellent thing. And the cost is pretty up there, but you get a lot of cool swag too. Like a lot of pretty much every vendor I've ever used is there. Even the font management program we use for my my team at my day job, like they're there. So I got to talk to them about like bugs that annoy the hell out of me on the program, and they got to placate me and got to listen. And you know, French Papers just giving these awesome like giveaways, which I'm like, that's almost worth the price of admission, because French Paper, if you can get anything by them, or like House Industries, it's like you've won. So I don't know. It's just, I would say it's overloading. And by the time you leave, you feel like you've been spun around in a bottle and kind of let out with just a bunch of steam behind you, you know? So I'm still kind of processing it and like still kind of considering how I'm going to take lessons or just reminders, like really healthy reminders, and kind of apply them, you know? Yeah. So, yeah, so that's pretty much, that's what I got.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say, like, the differences between like a Phoenix Design Week conference and Adobe Max, there are some benefits to a smaller conference and obviously some towards a bigger conference. But one of the cool things about that smaller conference is like Steph and I got like a really like intimate like workshop with Draplin. So I don't know, what was your takeaway from that, Stefan?
I mean, it's the same kind of thing. Like I left kind of speechless. I mean, I've seen Draplin before. He did pretty much the same demo a couple of years ago at Design Week as well. But I always just leave these things mystified. I feel like I have like a full week, a couple weeks where I'm still, you know, like you said, like just processing, trying to still take it all in. And it really just kind of reignites that flame for me and makes me want to just go out and just do things. Which, you know, amongst all of the madness of just the day-to-day, just grinding and work and doing things, it's almost like an escape, at least for me. But yeah, Draplin's event was really awesome. I even like got to like meet up with him afterward and go out with him to lunch and just kind of kick it with him for the day and had like a really great time. He's one of the coolest people I've ever met. He's like, as he presents himself on stage, he's the same exact person. He even stayed until the end of the event to sign autographs for hundreds of people who wanted to just shake his hand, took photos. He just stayed the entire event. So yeah, it's just really cool to see that. And, you know, being a part of something like that and seeing all the other speakers too. Yeah, I'm still like, I'm at that point where I'm like, I need to do more. I need to keep pushing myself to do more. So,
yeah.
So as far as like, as a networking thing, and I'm going to assume, but I could be wrong. Would you consider yourself an introvert?
I'd say I'm maybe a couple, maybe 2 or 3% more on the extroverted side.
Okay,
I'll go out and like talk to people, but I have my moments. I feel like in large crowds, it does make me a little claustrophobic from time to time. But yeah, I have no problem going out and talking to people. I think that's a part of like it's essential for freelancing even too. Is you have to go out and you have to meet people, and it's a sink or swim kind of thing. So. I was before, like I wouldn't dare, but I, you know, kind of had to put myself out there a little bit and come out a little bit, but you know, I have my moments.
Because I mean, it's almost a necessity, and I consider myself an introvert, even though I do enjoy talking to people. Sometimes it's hard to like just inject myself in a conversation or just start talking to somebody, but it just depends. And it's definitely something I'm working at. And it's been that way sort of my whole career. I mean, there's always those things that you don't want to do. Like, I mean, I've been doing this for a while. So, I mean, back in the days, you know, where we have to actually go to places and drop our portfolios and stuff and do cold calls before emails and all that. And I hated doing that stuff. And I mean, I had this little tape recorder with a little suction cup thing. So when I talk on the phone, because this is before you could record stuff like an iPhone or whatever, because I was afraid I was going to get somebody's pronunciation of their name wrong or how to spell it. And I would call up, ask who the art director was. I mean, now you can just research all that stuff, a lot of that online, but back then you couldn't do that. So I hated doing that, but I had to do it. There wasn't any way around it. So it's kind of doing those things that you don't really want to do, but the more you do it, the more comfortable you get doing it. And just at this being my first design conference, I was surprised at kind of what I was, you know, able to kind of, you know, push myself to do. And there's certain times where I wish I would have done more. I wish I would have went up and talked to some other people and everything. But yeah, it was really weird. Like at lunch, I think I talked about this on a video, but at lunch there was, you know, I went up and got my lunch, and there were some tables, like a person here at a table, a couple people. So I just decided to go sit in the table with the most people. And I introduced myself, and the first person I was talking to, I asked what her name was, and she said her name was Nikita, and she ended up being one of the speakers. And what I didn't realize is just by nature of sitting down and like talking to people that I don't know, I kind of stumbled into what was sort of like a working lunch, like a sort of like a lunch workshop thing. And it's not like I wasn't invited or anything, but I just didn't know. I just sat down and like, oh, this is the thing that you guys are doing right now. And I just kind of walked into it, and it was kind of a cool thing. So, I mean, that type of stuff, it was really cool. And, you know, all the speakers there were, you know, the ones that I did talk to or ask questions to. I mean, the thing about these conferences is like, sometimes you do have that fear of talking to people, but everyone is really cool. Like Josh was saying about the high fives and everything. I mean, people are all kind of there for the same reason. And I don't think anyone's going to like brush you off or anything like that. So.
Yeah. And a reminder, I kept, cause I went with a couple friends who are like high school teachers, which be cautious. They go hard at those things, at those events. But anyhow, like I kept kind of reminding them and myself like that, like these are all people who like most of our day is like spent staring at a screen in isolation or talking to people who are staring at a screen in isolation and trying to kind of get them to collaborate. But it's like we're by nature kind of like more introverted, like most designers. And so when you get a group like that in a massive crowd, it's like it's actually weird because nobody's usually going to approach another person. But if they are approached, they'll just be like, "Oh, I want to talk," because like most people are going there for connection. Mm-hmm. So it's like it like really when you kind of like just go at it from that approach, you realize like, oh, okay, it's like the same like the person sitting at the table thinking the same thing. Like, I wonder if I should like start a, they're thinking the same thing. And then occasionally, I'm sure there's some bad people in the crowd, but you'll find out. So. I agree. It's like there's really not much to lose, and going to those events will really shake you of that fear, which is really good to get you out in the real world. Like Robert in the chats mentioned, Robert Johnson said, design is a fun job. You're saying that sometimes you have to go back and drink from the goblet of original intent, and I think that's a good point. Saying it's basically good to be hungry. And if you stutter or take too long with a client, the client will think you're wasting their time and push you aside. Clients want solutions to their problems. And if you have a word game on point, you get the job. And that's actually a fair point. Like, you got to work those social skills because you're going to have to talk to human beings who are hiring you, Yeah,
I just wanted to piggyback on that, but I've never seen this happen, because Robert's leaving a lot of comments and they're all relevant to the conversation, but apparently YouTube said he had gave him a timeout or something because they thought he was spamming us. I didn't know that was a thing, but
I was loving it. Like I was about to read almost everything you wrote. Yeah, like definitely. Whenever YouTube lets you comment again, Robert, we're with you. We're with you. We like the comments. Thanks for watching. Yeah. So I don't know. Do you guys so what did you come out of Phoenix Design Week with? I mean, because the thing with the connection thing is it's got to be kind of authentic in the sense that if I go there and I'm like, I'm going to hustle and make friends with this person so that I can get jobs, people see through that, a lot of the time, if you just get in an authentic conversation, like, hey, isn't it cool they have free beer here? That's a good starter. You'll end up kind of connecting with people, and then out of nowhere, organically, you'll be like you were saying at the lunch table, where it's like, oh, you're one of the speakers here. That's usually, I think, how it'll work. And a lot of the time, even attendees of that event, it's just like the same advice Scott and I have given about comic conventions. When you go, be cautious about who you're talking crap about, because it's a small little world. And you never know who's next to you. That might be the art director who could have given you a ton of work and is now nope. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, because when I was sitting next to Steven, I was talking about his poster and everything, and I think he may have said something about how he didn't know why they chose the posters they did. And I said, yeah, I was a finalist. So yeah,
snap! Yeah, it's thrown.
Yeah, I kind of just I'm blunt about how I feel too, and it's not that I feel all any of the posters were bad or anything like that. I saw there were a ton of really, really solid submissions. Yeah. So I don't know what won or what happened with that, but I had some that I was like, man, even mine, I feel there were 5 or 6 that I felt were way above what I was doing.
No, too. I totally.
So I was I'm surprised with how there were a handful of them that I thought were, really solid. There wasn't anything I saw that was bad.
Right.
Period. I think all the posters were great, but yeah, I think there was really stiff competition, and just me personally thought I was man, I'm surprised that some of these didn't kind of jump in there as well.
No, I totally agree.
But yeah, off what Josh was saying, I think going to conventions with creative people, it's always so much easier than just these typical business, just marketing or networking meetings that you go to. Because more often than not, when you go to those things, the conversation starts with the whole, "What do you do?" You know, it's always kind of like, if you're not of like any value to me off that question, then it was nice meeting you. Let's part ways, kind of thing. But I feel like at these conventions, everyone's there for the same reason. We all share that same creative passion. We're all there to see great design and listen to great speakers and just be inspired. And I would just go and talk to random people, and you know, it's a small community too. There are 500 people, and since I go to a lot of these things, being involved with AIGA, I knew a lot of the people there. So to me, it was kind of like a homecoming. Like, oh hey, you know.
Nice.
But like Scott and I met, and you know, just kind of hit it off and just started talking, and you know, saw each other again at the poster Retrospecticus event as well. And it's just really cool to see how these things happen and how they work, just from someone starting a simple conversation like Scott did with me.
Yeah, and that's and from me as like a first timer and somebody who, you know, one of the main reasons I wanted to go to this conference, other than that I've been listening to a lot of podcasts of people talking about how great design conferences are and everything and how beneficial they are. I've just kind of been focusing online and YouTube and all that kind of stuff. And I know there's a design community here locally. And I mean, as far as the comic, because we do, Josh and I don't know about you. I mean, you said you're big into anime, but Josh and I are pretty big into comics. So locally, I know some of the comic book artists, and I kind of know that scene. But as far as the design community, I'm not really involved in that. I want to get more into it, and we'll have to talk later about, you know, the AIGA and everything. But yeah, so that was something that I want to do more of. So, but for you, Steffan, so you've been to like the big ones, like you've been to Adobe Max, and you've been to and you like obviously a few times, I don't know how many, but the Phoenix Design Week. What's the difference between those, and what are some of the pros and cons or benefits to one versus the other? Or
right. Well, so Max, as Josh mentioned, Max is massive. Like I went to Max in 2015. And it was an awesome event. I think the funny thing that you mentioned with the horse thing that they did with clipping and mapping, during Sneak, they did the same exact thing in 2015. I remember that, and I was like, holy shit, that's like really cool. But it's just really cool to see all of those previews of what's to come, and it makes you really question, like, shoot, are we going to be out of jobs like in the next few years or so? But just seeing where tech is going in our industry and whatnot is really cool. Obviously, Max has a wider variety of speakers and workshops to go to. I mean, heck, they have like 15, 18, 20,000 people at these things. So it gets pretty crazy. I was surprised that we were able to pull Aaron Draplin for Phoenix Design Week, because he's a ticket seller. He's a headliner for sure. But aside from the size, of course, and just the amount of workshops, they are very similar. You know, you have, you know, just people you can network with. And I mean, we don't have the floor of all of the different companies with their, you know, their booth set up and whatnot to just kind of like go around. It's mostly like, we'll have like 3 or 4 down the hall. So it's like a micro Max, I would say. Phoenix Design Week was these smaller conventions. But yeah, I think the last time when I went to Max, I don't know if you guys know Aaron Blaise. He's an illustrator for Disney. He worked on like Spirit.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he's got a YouTube channel, right?
Yeah, he does like really great work. I sat in, I think my biggest takeaway from Max was sitting in on him and seeing his demo. Really great guy. Got to talk to him as well. Awesome illustrator. Just one of those people that you look at, you're like, man, he's just so young. Yeah. Yeah, I'd say that to me, that's the biggest difference between the two, is like, it's just kind of a macro version of what we experienced at Design Week.
Yeah, and I think actually a smaller, more intimate one could be even more beneficial, especially for networking. And what's funny about, is it Draplin? I always say Draplin.
Yeah, it's Draplin, yeah.
Okay. Well, you know, so what's funny when you see him speak is that he's pretty clear about that too. He's pretty much like, if I get invited out anywhere, I'm there. Like, because he just like he really is kind of one of those guys who just like, he wants to do work for people. He wants to talk to people. He like wants to hustle his stuff. And in like a really sincere, just like really admirable way. So
Yeah, I don't know if you mentioned it during the presentation at Max too, but one of the things you said over and over again is like 90% of his body of work is just stuff he does for himself or for friends. He's like, but the industry doesn't know that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but
Well, and
he
I
just
think
loves what he does.
that's huge advice, because like I I started working professionally like straight out of school, but like I didn't really start getting like in design annuals or anything like that until I just started doing like my own stuff, and it was on Threadless at a time where like that was a good thing to do, for like, because it was just it was like the this massive thing. So all you really needed was like a win on Threadless, and you were all over the internet for like 2 weeks, and but like that was just me like getting off work and just being frustrated with like clients telling me to do stupid things and doing my own thing and being like, look how cool things can be when you let like a designer pick the colors and let them do everything. And that, that stuff, or stuff I did for friends, a lot of that like still occupies my portfolio, because it's like, inevitably it's, if it's cool, people are going to look at it and go, oh, I want my stuff to look cool, like it's just inevitable. So it's good advice, because it's like if I had filtered out stuff I was doing for fun out of my portfolio, I think it would be pretty bland. It might be like illustrations of like cheerleaders holding beer or something, and it's like it's, I don't know, it's I think it's really good advice. Yeah, there's so much, man, out of those conferences.
And it's interesting you bring that up too, because that's something I kind of talked to my students about, and even students that I've mentored before I started teaching was even just like young designers overall who are just fresh into the industry don't realize that like passion projects are what really like drive you into the industry and get you attention and help people to like notice you, as opposed to just, hey, I'm throwing something together and it's like a branding project, but I don't really like it. It really does show. So like these things that you're working on in your free time and having fun with and just knocking out because out of your frustration, I'm sure that's like 10 times better than this thing that you haphazardly threw together because the client wanted it, right?
Yeah.
So.
And you learn lessons doing that too, because like sometimes, like when you take the client out of the equation, a lot of the times you might find, like, at least I did, I learned a lot about design doing that, because I realized like taking the client out, like I did have a lot of shortcomings, because I was like, I'm not being art directed and this sucks, Yeah. And so that's like a nice wake up call too, because it makes you up your game if you want to get to the point where you can make kind of self-authored work and stuff. So just like across, that's so hard to teach to students. It's also hard to adjunct, man. I did it for a while, and it's like I love teaching, but it is hard to make work when you're freelancing or when you're running your own business, because you're losing money being there, So there's always like this, at least for me, there was always this part of me that's like, I want to teach these kids, but I just got this thing, and it's like, do I turn that down to take these hours to teach these kids? But I do miss it. Like I miss teaching. It's an incredible experience doing, because
it's rewarding. Like overall, I think there's just that passing of your knowledge, kind of passing the torch, and it feels great to me. It's invigorating and it helps me. There's a little bit of reassurance with it too, that you know what you're doing and you know what you're talking about. And
and also like there's moments where like you're doing something one way that you've done for like 10 years, and your student goes like, what about this thing? And you're like, oh dude, like you just saved me hours. Like, so it's an exchange, because it's like, I felt like, I feel like you learn a lot from your students too. I think maybe, I don't know, but yeah, that's definitely one of the coolest things, is like, and also just seeing that fire and like that thing. It's like we're talking about with the conventions, just that early fire is like, that's also your competition. And it's not that competitive. Like we're not like, getting in bar fights or anything over clients, but we are competing for the same dollar a lot of the time. So, you're going to get outdone by the kid who like needs the job and like is just looking for a way in. Unless you can kind of retain that passion and bring it to your clients and your projects, So, if you can swing it, teaching's great with that. So. This is interesting. He just said he's worried about AI because it's being incorporated. Sorry, Robert Johnson in the chats. He's worried about AI in marketing and seeing that it's being incorporated, and that it can help assemble ads on the fly and serve them up to a web page without a designer at all, and it worries him. And the UX or UI, I never know the right acronym, guy from Microsoft was there. And one of his big points, it was about like the future of user experiences. And he actually made the point that you really need to be aiming to be kind of unique and individual, because things that are like grid-based, that are symmetrical, that are predictable, are all automated. So like that's literally going to happen. And so the things that are going to kind of stand out are more of the human element. And so like the more you can kind of bring some of that humanity into your design, like that, the better, you know?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that even like in my space, like logo design and branding and whatnot. There, I forget what the site was called, but there's and there might be more than one even, but they auto-generate logos. So you just fill in information. Hey, this is what my company's called. This is imagery I like, and it'll just kind of splice things together. And poof, here you have a $20 logo. There are things like Fiverr and all these other things. And I mean, Fiverr's not so much automated, but there will always be like these cheaper means of putting things together that can, you know, pump them out really quickly. But the quality and, like you said, that human element really isn't there.
Yeah.
So I think it doesn't so much worry me. I think that just kind of weeds out those who aren't willing to actually appreciate and value you for what you do.
Yeah, and I think, and I mean, Corey, who we've had on a million times, also has, you know, his thing about how do things robots can't. So we're, as creatives, I mean, we're in a better position than a lot of other jobs, because I mean, once computers and things learn to be creative, then the world is basically over at that point. So I think we're a ways off from that. So I think in the future, people are going to value creativity a little more than they probably do now, because it's just, you know, it's not something that the AI is going to be able to do that easily.
Yeah, and like, so that's why I think like if you have a strength in like conceptual logos, and I don't mean like high art conceptual that you look at and you're like, what is this? But I mean like logos that are conveying something pretty heavy or conceptual in them. I think I can't see those getting automated, you know, because it's hard to get my computer to come up with a good concept. It's really, I wish I could. I'd probably play it for all it's worth for the year till I lost my job. but you know, the conceptual thinking, like more the kind of more abstract thinking, like that's
right.
the stuff. That's the stuff that like really sells things, and it's just really hard to just kind of generate automatically. So like that's my hope. I also think there's just something to the tactile and hand done. So if you got that skill in your back pocket, that's something you can take with you to the grave, and it's always pretty durable. So like that's why I'm sure you do the same with your students, but it's like I always encourage, you know, like really getting your foundations, because like software changes. I knew a lot of dudes when I first got into this thing that were like masters of Quark, and a lot of them never got back into design because that was their gimmick. Like they didn't have much other than knowing it. They didn't, you know, like what to do with it, or like if you think of all the typographers that for like a flash in the pan got work because they knew 4 filters on Photoshop when those first came out. And it was like, wow, you can make it glow and it's 3-dimensional. You know,
I have a good friend who's a creative director who up until a couple of years ago was using Adobe Image Styler still, wasn't using Photoshop at all. And he just got kind of frustrated when he got to the point where he's like, I've got to make the move. Things are advancing too much. And he's an older, he's not an old guy or anything, but he's an older designer. He's been in it for years and years. And so like trying to make that transition from something so just so outdated to, you know, how fast and crazy Photoshop is now it's really heavy. But luckily for him, I mean, he's a quick learner and he has that traditional sense. He's, you know, by trade a traditional artist, and he's tied that into digital. So I tell, you mentioned earlier too, I tell my students before any project, start on pen and paper. If you have a, you know, if you have a tablet, even, you know, feel free to go at it that way too. But conceptualizing is just key. Getting your ideas down really does matter and does help.
Yeah, I fought Creative Cloud for the longest time, and then eventually I was like, you know what, I just got to upgrade. I got to go for the subscription because it's just getting too far away from my, you know, Illustrator. What was it? CS. What was the last one they had? 5, I think is what I had.
Yeah, they had CS6. Yeah, I had CS5 though too. I was doing the same thing. I'd hop in CC and I'd see like, I'd hover over an object and see the round corners. I'd be like, ooh, what the heck is this? And there would just be so much that would frustrate me. Layouts changed, and I was like, I hate CC. I'm not doing it. Ended up like knowing what the rounded corners, those little markers are.
I love
those.
Did.
I was like, oh my God, I'm not going back to CS5 ever again.
Yeah, yeah. And part of the problem was because
it's a tough week, you know, where you're just trying to like resize something, and it's like, oh, rounded the corners again.
Yep.
Yeah. What really hurts is when you go to your day job and you have CC there, and then it's like you see all this stuff, and it's like it's back and forth, and like, yeah, I got to upgrade at home too. So, but and like you know, like we were talking about earlier, there's so much new stuff coming down the pike as far as these live brushes and everything. I mean, it's just like,
I'm so excited for the freeform gradient global editing and whatnot. Did you guys see that? Oh my God. Like
huge.
I hate those gradient meshes. I mean, I did this one project where I had to do all these vector emojis, and it was they want a very airbrush look. And I tried, you know, I got it to look okay, but it just took forever to kind of get those gradients to work. And this looks like, oh man, this is gonna be a game changer. So
yeah, I mean, because like basically whenever a client would want that look, I'd usually do it, you know, vectors and then bring it into Photoshop and do the rendering there because it was more organic. But like that's a huge game changer, just like being able to add points wherever you want to kind of add the gradient of color. That's going to be huge.
Yep.
That'll be a huge time saver, and it'll, you know, unfortunately, it might bring back a really like the Photoshop thing I was talking about with the filters, where I think for like a month and a half, people are going to be all about gradients. But I hope the flat thing kind of sticks around because it's so like base level awesome.
Yeah, and I think too with even things like gradients, like I love, like there's so many things that I see, even like using strokes on objects. I feel like anything can look good so long as you do it tastefully and do it well. I mean, I think even Papyrus is a great font if it's used for things like, you know, what it was intended for, like, you know, Aztec-y Egyptian kind of stuff.
Yeah, or like church youth groups in the 1990s.
Yeah, or you know, your uncle's plant company, like flower shop or whatever. It's like it's just terrible when people misuse things and abuse it. Like I have some students that'll come in with projects where they're using gradients, and I'm like, it's a tasteful thing. You'll get an understanding of how it works and whatnot, but you're using it in a way that's like it's like you'll learn. I'm not going to tell you your stuff's bad, but I'm going to tell you that's, you know, you can improve. So yeah, like I'm stoked to see what people start doing with it. I'm stoked to use it myself because I've had so many issues trying to mess with the gradient mesh and overlapping gradients and just doing all of these things to try to solve the problem, and just makes it so much easier now.
Yeah. I just hope it actually happens, because the one thing with well, I guess that will actually be released, right? And was that one of the releases or sneaks? I
don't think that was a sneak, because I don't know if you saw the sneaks. You might have. I don't know if they posted those or not, but maybe they did.
So these are new features that are I think they were just released. I haven't updated my CC just yet, but
I haven't either.
Ooh, okay. So then I got to mess with the gradients too, because I didn't know that was released. I thought that might have been in like a sneak one. I was jumbling it. There's crazy amounts of stuff that are coming through that kind of reaffirm like how good developers are, and it's also encouraging to know that they realize these are irritating and need to be fixed. You know, it's kind of nice to like have like a mechanic kind of go, yeah, your car is like crazy, you know, or something like that. If you've been feeling that when you've been driving for like 2 years, you're like, something's wrong with this car. To have somebody validate it and give a solution is really good. But it can be scary, especially if you become too reliant on kind of the old ways of the programs. And so, like, I know for me, even that alt being missing, I'm going to make the same mistake I occasionally would make on Illustrator, you know, by hitting the alt. It's going to take a week or two, you know.
I talked about where I have a PC at home and a Mac at work, and well, the day job's going away, so now I'll be just back to the PC, but just those shortcuts going back and forth. And I mean, it took a long time, but eventually something in my mind said, oh, you're at home, so you've got to hit this key instead of that key. But for a while, it was just like, oh, I kept hitting the wrong keys, and then I would forget from place to place. But eventually, you get used to it. So,
for sure.
But I guess going back to kind of design conferences, and for people that may be thinking about going, and so again, Josh and I, this is our first time. Steffan's been to a few different conferences and everything. How would you, I mean, if you're kind of on the fence and you're like, I don't know if this is the right thing for me, or, I mean, what would you say to somebody who's maybe thinking about going to a conference? One thing I said is I would probably start small, start locally. You probably, unless your employer's paying for it, you probably don't want to jump right into something like a Max.
Right.
And there may be some, I don't know. I mean, maybe there's even something beneath like a design week, like little networking things or something. I don't know if that dip your toes in.
And I think to me, like a lot of issues that I see with people who are a little bit on the fence or skeptical is usually pricing, because a lot of these conferences are really like Max is really pricey. There are always like options for things like for Max, and maybe this may be the only kind of like option for Max, but I think my ticket was like $200 because I was a student at the time that I went.
Okay. Cool.
And a lot of these places offer student discounts if your employer won't pay. Design Week, and I don't know about other creative conferences, but there are options for volunteer workers who want to help with the event to get in for free. If you put in some hours and you do work some booths, help with the merch, help with setup and tear down, things like that. It's like, hey, if you're young and you want to come in and like try these things out, you know, there are options. But I agree with what you said too, like start small. I would agree. I think Max was a bit overwhelming for me. I had a lot of fun with it, don't get me wrong, but it was my first conference and it was insane. So it took me a few weeks to just kind of like cool down a little bit from all of it. But yeah, I think the other thing too is like consider what you'll gain. Like research who's at the event, what workshops there are, and what opportunities you have, and whether or not it will actually benefit you. Because I know a bunch of people who I went to Max with one of my buddies, Kyle, when I went in 2015, and he's like, I don't need to go to any more of those. I went for networking, and I'm doing really good with my business now. And though it was fun, like I don't really have a need. And Josh, you said too, like you're at a point where you're like, hey, I'm tenured. You know, I've been doing this for years. I don't feel like the workshops will teach me much, but reaffirm the things I know. Maybe there might be a quick key or something I learned here or there, but yeah, you figure out what you're going for. If you're trying to learn, if you're trying to network, who's going, who you want to see, workshops, you know, all of those sorts of things. And if you determine from that research that it's for you, then go for it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't know about like those options for volunteers and stuff, but that makes a lot of sense, and students and things. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, another thing is like the beauty of the information age that we live in now is like you can access pretty much everything I saw online now. You know?
Yeah, I was. Oh, sorry, Josh.
So I mean, you'll miss like the human connection. There's an energy you miss, and like for me, I think that energy is beneficial because I can bring that back to my team, and so it's like. You know, when I'm directing my staff, it's like that's going to help. And actually, what's weird is it also like that's what I initially wanted to do it for. But I did get that weird byproduct of like also having like massive amount of encouragement for the stuff I'm doing when I'm off, like because I'm kind of pursuing a weird area of cartooning that's not super easy to market, and I just felt like after watching all these people over and over again just like attest to like that kind of thing being the thing, it kind of reaffirmed like and makes me want to not just do that, but the hard part is you want to do everything. Like I also want to just agree to every collaboration and like, it's, so I'm still going to have that winding down period, cause but it would be pretty overwhelming as a student. The nice thing as a student though, is that's the best rate you'll probably get. So,
Yeah, I think for me, Adobe Max was like $200 as a student.
Yeah.
It's like nothing. I think some of the more premium tickets are like VIP tickets and whatnot are what, like $2,000, $1,300, something like that. They're way up there. So, yeah, it's just insane. But those things are available. It's I think it's just a matter of like even at a conference like Adobe Max, it's a matter of making a call and just checking and seeing what options there are. The great thing about like Design Week and any kind of I don't know what's going on with the other state chapters for AIGA. If they're throwing, I'm sure a lot of them throw conferences as well, but a lot of these events are thrown on strictly by volunteers. Like nobody in AIGA got paid for this event. Like it was all just everybody committing their time and making it happen. So yeah, it's like if you help out or you reach out and you make the effort to do the research and figure out what options are there, then that concern in a lot of cases could be alleviated.
That's cool. Yeah. So, and one of the things that it may have had to do with the arrangement with the speakers and everything at Phoenix, but the thing that kind of bummed me out is that they didn't record any of the conversations. And I asked about it and somebody said there was a reason for that. But like, because the Armin Witt, he kind of opened the show. I mean, I loved his talk and stuff he was showing up. I wish I could have rewatched that. And unfortunately it wasn't, they weren't recording any of that, because Draplin's cool because you can see a lot of that stuff. He's got a lot of that videos online. It's not quite the same as being there in person, especially when you've got those intimate workshops.
Right.
But yeah, I would have loved to be able to kind of replay some of that stuff, because there was a lot of gold there with some of the speakers and everything. And maybe, what was it? I forgot his name. The animator from Disney. That was awesome. But yeah, a lot, just some really cool speakers. I would have liked to rewatch some of that stuff. But
yeah, and that's the great thing about Max too.
Yeah.
Like Josh said, like they throw everything up. I think like a week or so after the event. Maybe I don't know what.
I might have been watching it live, or yeah, I don't know.
But you don't get that same hype. You don't get that same interaction of the Command Z in Photoshop.
Right.
Maybe have like a little celebration in your chair at home, but yeah.
So again, kind of going back to like going to a conference. I mean, for first timers, like how do you kind of approach this? So before when I was getting ready to go and having not been to one before, I had sort of I don't want to say it's a dilemma, but something I was kind of in my head battling with myself over. And that was, and Josh and I talked to this before, and that was whether I wear the green lab coat. and then I watched some videos and some of the advice for people that are trying to network, for people wanting to network was like, kind of stand out but not too much. So I didn't know what was too much. And like when I do a comic convention, I've got a booth there, so that fits in well, and I wear it on YouTube and stuff like that. But I was like, well, you know what? I'm just going to do it. It was one of those things like I'm on the fence, and maybe it's not a big deal. And maybe I should ask you, Stephen, Steffan, sorry. I mean, you can be totally honest. What was your reaction like? Or was it like not even a big deal for a guy to be wearing like a green lab?
Oh, I thought you were a freaking weirdo, man. I was like, who's this guy talking? No, I'm messing with you, man. I love it. I think, to to me, it's part of your personal brand, and it's part of your personality, and it's who you are. If anyone's going to judge you for that, they can kick dirt. Like, it's, you know, you stand out. It's like you said, you know, no one else is doing something like that. You're wearing a green lab coat, walking around this event and just owning it. So, I think that also kind of ties back to what we were talking about of just advice for these events. Be yourself. Do you. If someone can't accept you for who you are, then that's their problem. On to the next person who will. You know?
And creatives are usually pretty accepting people. And so I don't think, and to be honest, I think it was a good decision because there are a lot of people that came up to me and like some people like, there's a story behind this or something like that. And it was a good conversation starter for somebody who, like myself, who finds it hard to start a conversation. I can carry on a conversation, but just starting is the hard part for me.
I think that's the great thing too, like for networking, is that conversation starters. Even like I've had a couple networking events. I talked to a guy because I was wearing a Star Wars shirt, and he just came up to me and he just straight up said, you know, I don't understand stormtroopers. Like, they wear this armor and they're supposed to be the baddest, you know, force in the galaxy, and they get killed with one blaster shot. They can't even see out of their helmets. They can't even like hit a target. Like, what is it? And we just started talking about Star Wars, and I was like, this is really cool. Yeah, wear something that someone will recognize. Wear something that's your personal brand. I'll wear like a Warriors or a Cavs hat or a Suns hat, and people are like, oh, that's your team, or are you from the Bay, or you know, so. Just things like that work too. But I loved the lab coat, to be honest, man. I thought it was great. You don't see anyone else doing that. The only thing that I saw was even kind of close to that, and I forget his name. He was the MC.
Yeah, Marshall.
Marshall was owning his own style, and
that was another reason why I decided to wear it, because I saw him on the website, and I said, well, if he's going to wear that, and I actually talked to him. I went up to him at lunch. And I told him that. I told him, you know, I was debating whether I should wear this, but you know, I saw you in like the on the website, and I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to do it. So so I kind of thanked him for that. And that's the thing. That's the thing. What we're talking about is there was a common ground there that gave me an excuse or a reason to actually go and talk to him. And he was kind of sitting at a table by himself, and then he kind of came over and sat with everyone else after that, which is weird because like. He was the MC, so you're thinking, you know, he should just kind of be out there, but he was kind of by himself, and it's not. And that's the thing. It's like you can totally approach pretty much anyone. I mean, I just started talking to the people that ended up being, you know, presenters or whatever, or the MC, and you know. So I mean, but finding these little things, whether it's a T-shirt or some common ground that you can kind of say, you can kind of find a common interest and then kind of go from there. I think that's a really good tip for people that may be a little nervous about how do you approach people like that. Because, you know,
that kind of reminds me of something from Jessica Hish's talk where she was saying like basically like what like she learned from kind of doing art and moving to New York and being just kind of this person who's new to New York and wanting to get in on design and stuff was basically to just walk into a party like you own it and you belong there.
Yeah.
You know, because like you kind of, there's no other way. there's and then she was talking about kind of the difference between like that and California, where it's like it's not quite like that. but it did strike me as like this probably gotten her pretty far in her career. The ability to just kind of step up and be like, I belong here. Like you kind of need that because when you're endeavoring to do creative work, you're going to be inculcated with like self-doubt and imposter syndrome, especially if you have like a setback, you know, that at least for me, for like it's almost predictable. If I have a setback, it's like one of my first thoughts is like, they figured out I don't know what I'm doing, you know. But, you know, like then like a good way to kind of get over that is like, yeah, like teaching a class is a really good way to get over that, because the first time I stepped into a classroom in front of like college students, I was like, am I faking this? Like, what am I doing? Like, I'm not qualified to teach college students. And then I started talking about this stuff I've done, and they're looking at me in awe, like as if that's great stuff. And I'm like, oh, I guess I have done some stuff. And then they'd ask a question and I'd have an answer. Like most of the time. And not only would I have an answer, they'd like queue up this whole thing, and I'd be able to share this like knowledge I've acquired. And so it's like, that's when you realize like, oh, I guess that's what teachers are. And I've had the same, I've had the same experience parenting, where it's like, dude, like getting into parenting, like nobody knows what they're doing when they're starting. You could read all the books in the world, but like when my wife and I first drove our kid home, we felt like we were kind of looking at the hospital like, are they insane? Like, they're just going to let us like take a baby home? Like, what am I going to do with, like, how do you like keep this guy? Like, this is crazy. They let you do that? Like, because all the preparation in the world is just like, you know, goes out the window, and you kind of feel like you're faking it, and you just kind of do. And then you learn it and you get good at it. So it's the same thing. Like, if you're nervous about like going to like a social thing with other designers, just fake it. Go in, fake it. Like, it, you know, it's easy to say, I guess, on paper, like, just be yourself. But if you can't, just go in and fake it. Like, and after, you know, like an hour, it's not going to be a big deal, you know?
Yeah, I think it's that initial like push too, because like, I think like everybody knows going into these things that's why everybody's there. But like, I've found myself multiple times just like, I just like don't feel like doing it. And it's this weird, like irrational kind of, not necessarily like fear, but anxiety that'll hit, and I'll just ease my way into a group and just kind of be like, you know, here I am, and just start talking. But after you have like one good conversation, like, at least for me, I feel like I'm like good to go for the rest of the event.
You kind of get that little boost of confidence.
Yeah. And I think for like a lot of these, like, especially local creative events, like the ones here in Phoenix, it's a very, very small town. Like, pretty much every event I go to, I know at least one person. I don't think I've gone to a single event that I haven't known somebody. It's a small community that's very closely knit. So it's nice being able to go and see somebody, you know, and talk to them, and then that's all it takes.
Yeah, I found that too, because I like I said, I don't really think that I know a lot of people as far as designers and people at agencies and things like that. But so I just went to this conference like I didn't go with anyone else. I'm just going to go there, and sure enough, there are people there that I knew already, and you know, friends that I've had for a while that just ended up being there. One at the Drink and Draw that I hadn't seen for a while. Another one that we used to have this thing called West Side Creatives, and you know, we meet up every once in a while. But he was there, and so I hung out with him for a while. But yeah, I was kind of surprised that I ended up knowing people already, and then of course I met new people, which is, I mean, that's kind of what you're there for. So it's and I feel like another thing too for those who are, you know, contemplating on going to events like this, bring a friend. Bring someone who's, say, even more extroverted and confident than you are to help bring you up and start those conversations with people, because I can't say how many times I've done that, and that got me going.
Yeah. Plus, you're going to feel like more confident on your, like, just in your element with a friend to kind of get out of your comfort zone, because you can edge each other forward to it. So it's a good thing. Dude, the first time, like, so I joined like the NCS. I've told the story a few times here.
Might want to explain what that
I'll do it briefly. So it's in the National Cartoonist Society, in the LA chapter. And I walked into this thing, and I've read who was like a member, and I was like, my buddy Lonnie, who's like getting kind of well known in comics, invited me, and I was like, what am I going to do there? Like, I can't be a member of that, because it's like voted on kind of thing. There's like an initiation, all of that stuff. And like the whole time I was just like, nah, it's not going to happen. But then I had to remember, like, I didn't think my first client would happen. Like any kind of accolade I've gotten, I didn't think would happen. But I just, the fact that I risked it and was like, you know what, it could. That actually helped, because when I was in the room, it's like there's people I still feel super intimidated every time I go, because these are like heavy hitters. Like, some of the guys in there have like directed Disney films, you know, and there's still like one guy there I still haven't even brought up the nerve to talk to, because he's just huge. Like, he's a legend, and there's a lot of those. And so it's like, but but what was weird was like when I submitted, like when I showed my portfolio and stuff, it's like nobody cares about your laurels. They're like, oh, you're serious. Like it's like if you're making good work, nobody cares. Like, I mean, they kind of do, but like especially people who've gotten a lot from their careers, like I think if they see somebody who's good at their craft, who's just hustling and trying, there's going to be an instant level of respect. Like I know I get that. Like if I meet somebody who's like green, they've never worked professionally ever, and I look at their work and it's excellent, I don't care about the extra stuff. And so why would they? You know, like it's fascinating, but it is fascinating how that happens to creatives. It's weird.
Yeah, I kind of felt that when I went to the National Poster Retrospecticus, because I kind of, when I went there, I thought, well, maybe I'll talk to JP, who curates the whole thing, and just because I remember listening to a podcast where he said, you know, sometimes he's actually looking for people because, you know, he gets like he'll send out requests and doesn't hear back from the art. Of course, he's probably sent them out to like definitely more well-known artists. But once I got there and you get up close and you see a print by like DKNG and you see all those halftones and and all the stuff that they do, and it's like, oh my God, these guys are totally out of my league. But and you kind of focus on that. I was focusing on all the national park stuff, which is that's not what I do. But then you look at, there's some other stuff that like, yeah, I mean, my stuff's different, but maybe there's a series or maybe there's something there that he could do something with. So I don't know. I ended up talking to him and everything, and he was very cool. Like he's just like, he asked if I was a creative, and I said, yeah. And I said, I don't know if my stuff's exactly what you're looking for, but and he gave me a card and everything. And so I don't know. I sent him an email with a link to a video I did on the show and everything. Who knows? All you can do is try, and then. And of course, but it was also inspiring because I've been wanting to do more than kind of the style I've been doing with my posters for a while. And I really want to step up my kind of printmaking game and everything. Because one of the reasons why I try to do something that I'm confident at, that I like, and that I think I can, that people will want. But sometimes I feel like I don't go that extra mile because the amount of time, like if I was to do something like a DKNG, the amount of time they spend on that, they've already proven themselves. So they know if they spend, however many hours on a particular piece, pretty much as soon as they put it out there, it's going to sell, where I don't have that track record. So it's like, is it worth for me to spend that much extra time, or just kind of keep with more of a simple style that I can do quickly, even though I am happy with it, but I know I can kind of do more. And now I think, I want to stretch myself and do something more on that level and see what happens with that.
Yeah. I mean, I think, just thinking about like just today, like I was like 5 minutes late to this thing, and it's because I just I'm feeling all that fire, that crazy fire from the convention. So like, and Corey just came back from a thing where he's feeling all boosted, from a conference as well. And so he sent me a link to like this weird thing from the US Mint where it was like, dude, do you want to try doing art for the US Mint? And he just sent me a link. He's like, dude, you'd be perfect for this. You should like show him some art. So you're supposed to show like certain samples, and I uploaded them and hit send, and then I got back on this. But what I had that moment of like, no, I'm not, like, because some of the guys who do those things are like there's like 3 lettering experts in the world or whatever. They're like masters of hand lettering. There's like a whole society, and one of them is like the key guy who does like currency. And so it's like I'm not there. But then I was like, I don't know. I applied for the Xeric years ago and got it, and like I had no right getting that. So who knows? Maybe this is that one time. Maybe they got an art director who's like hustling and looking for somebody to fill a spot. And it's the same thing. Like maybe a poster artist drops out and they need one, and you're there. Like the stars aligned,
Yeah. And you'll never know unless
you're being too hard on your work, and he'll see your work and think it's brilliant. experienced that multiple times where, you know, somebody will think my work's way better than I think it is, you know? So it is one of those things you got to have that kind of crazy confidence, because everybody graduating college tends to think they're good enough and they're not. And that's the insanity that gets us all into work.
Yeah.
It's like when you're out of college, your portfolio isn't good enough. Sometimes maybe it is, but it ends up being good enough because you're just crazy enough to like approach people, you know? So like, I don't know. I'm at least, especially fresh out of this convention, I'm trying to remember that, like the whole, just like, I don't know, man, like a lot of opportunities come from me just sending an email to somebody and being really candid and being like, I love your company. Can I do stuff for you guys? And they're like, sure. It's not always, but every once in a while you hit that like magic point where it's like they're thinking about a project. They get an email like, hey, can I work with you guys? You know?
You're never going to know unless you put your stuff out there. Like, it was weird because I just met with this client. We'll see if anything happens with it. But, you know, and this thing that's like perfect for me. So if it happens, it should be cool. But I kept asking him how he found me. And so I guess it came down to, he had asked some colleague or something about, you know, who does good illustration or like game design or whatever. And apparently I'm on some sort of list. It's an old list, but apparently there's a list out there of people in Arizona that are the person to talk to for if you want character design or game design. And I still don't know what that list is. I wish I did, but it's out there. I have no idea how that happened, but it would have never happened if I wasn't putting my work out there. So, you know, it's a weird thing.
Yeah, and it's kind of like you guys just said too. To me, there are like two sides of it. There's the side of like, hey, you never know until you try. Like, you might as well put in the effort, and you know, obviously, like do something that you have fun. Because I mean, it's like your shirt, man. Creators create. Like by nature, that's what we do. We just want to make things, and we feel that fulfillment when we make something that we love and that we enjoy. It fuels that creative fire. But maybe you make something and they love it. If they don't, they don't. It's just not their style. But you've got something cool to show off. Then that other side to me is like that Draplin side where he's like, hey, I just create things, man. I just make things because I have fun with it. No other reason than that. I don't need self-validation. 90% of my stuff is my stuff and friend stuff. The 10% is just the, stuff for clients. For me personally, I had a thing that I did, a contest I did, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago. You mentioned it earlier, Scott, like I'm a huge anime geek. I got a Crunchyroll account. I pay for it and everything. I love Avatar, and it's not technically like an anime, but there was a Dark Horse Comics Draw Yourself as a Bender contest. And so I was like, oh man, I got like, what do I have to lose from this? I spend a day doing a cool illustration, and maybe I lose a day of work. Or, say it goes somewhere and I get to meet the guys who, made the show and, get some cool merch and stuff from them and have my work featured in the next Dark Horse, the next Avatar Dark Horse comic. Like, I'll take that risk. Normally I don't do things like that, but I was like, hey, I love Avatar, man. I gotta. And I didn't get top 3, but I was a runner up. Awesome. Out of 2,000 plus submissions. So it was just one of those things I was like, it didn't, pay off like the ultimate like payoff, but it was still really cool to see that kind of a thing. And now I have a piece of work that I really like. And so it's just fun. Like, I think the poster thing, like you should just go for it. Just start putting things together, try new things.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Just like, so I went to like one of my classmates, my graduating class, like was Kevin Tong, who's like he's like mega famous in posters.
Yeah, he had posters there at this.
His style actually had such an impact on the industry that it made DK&J like change their coloring approach. I don't know if you noticed that, like all the poster artists started doing like the Tong style like gradient thing with the dots that he was crazy detail. So that partially just came out of somebody obsessively doing that. And that's when he got known. Like he was kind of getting in with gig posters, but like when he started putting in that time, it's like people just couldn't ignore it. Yeah. So to me, I think it's a mix, because I agree you got to kind of realistically assess the time you got. But if you have the desire to do it, I can't see it hurting.
Yeah.
You know, to just see at least, hey, what does one look like that? That's how I approach my comic. Like I finished a comic that I budgeted time on, and I just wasn't happy with. So now I'm like taking a lot of time. I'm hand lettering. I'm doing all that, and I feel way more confident showing it to people, because I'm like, yeah, this is hand let. You know, it's stuff I've always wanted to do that I knew would take time, and that's what made me avoid it. You know, but I'm hoping it pays off. You know, who knows? But it's like I think you gotta kind of like you were saying, it's like we gotta kind of follow our passions, like with what we're making, because then otherwise we can lose that kind of fuel, you know.
Yeah, and I feel like that's when you're at your best too. That's when you create your best work and you're most inspired. When you take something on, it's like, is there really any benefit from this? No, but screw it, I'm going to do it anyway. You know.
Yeah,
I'm at my most fulfilled and at my happiest when I'm able to just sit down and just plug away for hours and just focus on a project that, you know, I can just announce to the world and be like, hey, I made this thing. I don't care if it gets me anything. I made it and I'm proud of it, you know?
Yeah. And like the other thing is, like, just looking back, I think any of us looking back on like professional career, it's like, there's a lot of clients that were like maybe the highest paying jobs I got that I can't even remember the work I did for them. Like, it looks really nice on the resume, but I don't even remember what I made for them. But I do remember like completing something that was a personal project. Like, I'll remember the date. I'll remember what it was like to complete it. I'll feel this sense of like ownership and pride over it. And actually, weirdly enough, all of that personal stuff or like, you know, stuff I did for like $10 because it was for the Devastator, which is like a comedy magazine. And like they didn't have the budget to pay great, you know, but I do it because I just thought they were hilarious. That's all stuff that got me in the NCS. Like, the NCS that didn't happen from like the clients I've obtained throughout the years, you know, because like that was the stuff that, like, when I meet guys that are heavy hitters there, when they see that, like, if they see my professional stuff, they're like, meh, but they see the personal stuff and they're like, oh crap, you're serious, dude. You know, it's like that's the stuff that causes a double take, and I think causes people to have interest, because, man, people are going to connect to authenticity like most of the time, you know.
Yeah, and that's the other thing that Draplin also mentioned this, at least in Phoenix. I don't know if he did the same spiel with you as well, but one of the things that he said is, like, client projects are client projects. It's their vision, it's not ours. We're paid to give them what they want. So more often than not, you don't see that personal authenticity. And I mean, the care is there, you know, depending on the client. If you have a client who treats you well, like, you know, you're going to put that care and effort into it. But it's not the same as when you're letting your full creativity just go and do your own thing.
Yeah. I back before I had the job that I have now, I had applied to an ad agency, and I'd sent them when I thought they wanted to see some client work and everything. And so they called me in, and I'm showing them, I brought my iPad and everything, and I'm flipping through, you know, my client work and stuff that I would think an ad agency would be interested in. And they said, and then I got to my personal stuff, and they said, stop. And they said, this is why we called you in. We dig what you're doing here. And basically, and they didn't really even have a position for me. They just, they called me in because they liked that stuff and they wanted to talk to me, and, you know, possibly, you know, future, you know, freelance work or something like that. But yeah, it was that stuff that stood out to them. It was all my personal stuff, the stuff that I sell on circworks.com and all that kind of stuff. And so there wasn't a position, but I go home and later they dropped like a couple $100 on my store. So, I mean, that was kind of cool. So, you know, it's just always, I mean, people can tell what you're passionate about. And I think that's the stuff that's going to take you further.
Yeah. And I remember, like, see, like, I'm sure there's a lot of stories like this because you're currently teaching, but it's like I remember like one of the things that shocked me about students, and then I had to remember I was like that too. Is like I had this Photoshop class. It was one of the first classes. It was like a lower level, and I was like teaching how to clean up inks and do like digital coloring, just to kind of get them used to like, you know, using like separating like part of the layer and locking layers, and there's a lot of stuff they can get from it, but it's interesting and it's kind of fun. And so many of them were surprised that the cheats they thought they were getting away with on ink ended up creating this headache and nightmare when they got to scanning, because Photoshop didn't fix it all. And it's the same with like somebody taking like a really crappy photograph and then being shocked that like they can't hit a button and make it better, you know?
Yeah.
If you have like especially like product photography is like one of the least forgiving. If you get a bad shot of a product, you'll spend more time like touching up and remaking the entire product than you would by just retaking the shot, getting it right, and then doing little polishes and flourishes. And like just that lesson was a hard learned lesson for those kids. But I remember that being a lesson too, where I was like, oh, they noticed. Like, not they noticed, but like the machine noticed. Like it's like when you take those little shortcuts to, and it's almost like a little moment of selling out for your own stuff, you know? And it's like, if you're doing stuff with passion, don't sell out. Just do the thing you gotta do, you know? However, it is a balance, right? Because you also could be the guy just perfecting the same art over and over again. And there is a point where you got to let it go. If you're doing it for a client, that point's the deadline. You know, so you do like, but I mean, like personal work, I think like it, like Scott, when you're describing this vision of these like fully realized posters, I'm like, your posters look so freaking good already. I can't wait to see that, because that'll just I think it'll be mind blowing.
Yeah, I think part of it also was when I was first doing posters, I was trying to build a body of work, and now I have that. So now I don't have. I mean, I have stuff on there that, because I think that's another important thing, especially like with your personal projects and stuff. And you're talking about the project you're doing with like the Pokemon style logos. If you just did one of those, it's cool, but once you do a series, that's what starts to get people's attention and everything. So now that I've got a body of work, now I can afford to kind of take and spend, you know, the time that I would on maybe 3 prints into one, and really just try to take it to the next level, because I already have that sort of built up. So yeah, I think I had to get in that position to do that first. So.
Yeah, and there's no reason not to either. Like, I mean, I think you were showing me some of your stuff earlier too. Like I looked at your website, Instagram, and whatnot. You've got really like dope work. So I think like if you really put that passion into it, like there's nothing you can't do with it.
Yeah. The work I do at my day job. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, you're good. I was gonna say, Josh, what you were kind of talking about a second ago, and we were talking about it earlier as well, with kind of like side hustles and whatnot, like briefly. So one of my side hustles is sculpting. And so I just like to mess with clay. My dad and my grandpa, when I was growing up, I was just around that. They're both professional sculptors. They go to trade shows and sell their work and bronzes and whatnot. And so I took a sculpting class in college, and my first project from my professor was to sculpt a skull. I was like, I want to see your skill level. I want to see where you guys are at. I had never actually sculpted, and so I got home and I talked to my dad. I was like, hey, I'm gonna start doing this. He's like, yeah, let me. I gotta head out and go to work, but I'll be back and I'll help you out. I was like, don't help me. I need to build like an armature, like the skeleton, if you will, the base of it. I ended up doing that myself, but I spent 10 hours straight, couldn't pull myself away, sat down and focused and built the skull. To the point where my dad got home and he's like, there's nothing I can teach you. Wow. Like, there's literally nothing I can teach you. I went to my sculpture class and my instructor thought my dad helped me with it. And he's like, okay, well, I'm going to expect more from you on every project moving forward then. But I was talking to my students about this because I had my first in-class critique, and one of the students just put no effort into it. And I basically told him, I'm like, hey, like you didn't follow the instructions, you didn't do anything, like you didn't even make an effort, and this is like the start of your career. And I told him about that and how like I spent 10 hours working on this project, and his response was, "I'm sorry." It's like, what do you mean? What do you mean? I willingly did that of my own, like it was my own decision. I just loved it and I had fun with it, and I made a really kick-ass piece out of it. And that's just what it takes. Like sometimes like we'll have projects that we just can't pull ourselves away from. Like in your case, if you want to like dedicate a ton of time to these posters, there's no reason not to do it if you can make the time for it.
Yeah.
And that's where you'll see like your passion really thrive and make some really cool stuff. So for anyone who's like seeing this and has those same kind of self-doubts, or I don't know if I have the time, you just gotta make the time, but it'll definitely be worth it in the end.
Yeah, for sure. Like, and I've noticed that that's usually when like people, including myself, like level up. Like I didn't start to understand typography until I really started just dissecting stuff and kind of playing around. Like it literally requires some play and a little bit of just like intuitive thinking of like, okay, so I've had type classes, I still don't quite get it, and just pulling apart letter forms and like we're putting them back together again, and you know, like trying to kind of get away with altering a little bit, but then kind of figuring, oh, that doesn't work, this does. And like that's time consuming stuff, but a lot of the time if you're in that zone of like kind of exploration and really just trying to get like that's the big that is one of the biggest secrets, is just time. Like a lot of the biggest secrets of like the guys that are really good, like there are some that are absurdly fast, but a lot of it's just they spent more time on it. So I don't know, I do think like there's this desire to kind of meet, I still look to meet like a cartoonist who just doesn't labor over what they're doing, and I haven't met one cartoonist who has an easy time doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could just have to. You're going to have a tough time if you don't love it, you know. But we are getting. I think we're past our hour and a half. But is there anything more that anyone wanted to touch on the subject of like? I know we kind of went around, but this is all great stuff. So, but if there's anything more that you want to, you know, talk about before we kind of wrap things up, anything we glossed over that anyone would make a point of or anything?
I mean, I'd say if we were to go back to the whole idea of like why we initially had this kind of discussion about conventions, is like if you're ever in any kind of situation where you're considering it, just think about all of the benefits to you. Do some research, see what's going on at the event, who you can meet, what you can do. Bring a friend if you're too timid to talk to people, and just go and have fun. If it's some kind of a fear of, you know, budget and whatnot, you know, see what options are available. If you're a student, there are a lot of times options for student tickets. Volunteer stuff goes a long way too. So just a lot of things to consider with these events. But to me, in my opinion, I've gone to 4. I'm going to go to Design Week pretty much every year they have one. I'd love to go to an Adobe Max again. Not even just to network, just to be a part of the experience and continue to, you know, rekindle that creative flame. Because when you get amongst all the madness of the day-to-day and the client work and whatnot, you tend to lose sight a little bit. So there's just a lot to gain from it, in my opinion, from just going to a handful of them.
Yeah. I think that's perfect. That's perfect. Did you have anything else to add, Josh? Or
no,
that's great. All right, so so you're on my channel. Well, I guess I forgot how we do this. So I'm going to go over to Josh. Josh, where can everyone find you?
You can find me at quarterlystories.com in comic forum, and you can find me in design and illustration forum at joshuakemble.com, and you can find me in YouTube forum just by looking for Joshua Kemble. Make sure you spell it like it is down here, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, and you put up a new blog, which you hadn't done in a while, but you did like a little blog on Adobe Max, and if you want to watch Beck perform.
Yeah, I got like a lot of footage. I didn't record full footage because I just still like feel like it's just such a rip to the creators. So I just gave a little taste of everything and hopefully a feel of the experience. And yeah, it's worth checking out just to kind of get a taste of like what it's like. And like keep in mind that's a very small amount of all that went on there.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. Okay, Steffan, so where can people find you? Anything you want to promote or tell people about?
No, I mean, if you guys are, interested in just seeing what I do, I usually post on Instagram. It's just Steffan Stewart Design, Steffan Stewart. And then my creative agency is Bridge, which is bridgephx, as in phoenix.com. Yeah, and if you have questions or just want to chat about design or anything, I'm always open to talk. So feel free to hit me up.
Cool. Yeah, and both those links, like I said, are in the description of the video. So definitely check those out. And thanks for coming on, Steffan. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun chatting with you guys. It's always good to talk with fellow creatives who get it and just be able to just shoot it off. So
yeah, it's funny because I mean, it's just like when you have people like creatives, it's just like, I mean, you and Josh don't know each other at all. We don't know each other very well, but you can just start off and it's like we've been friends forever. So it's so cool. All right. So yeah, and again, you're on my channel, so you kind of know where to find me. You can also find me at circworks.com. There's a new website up there and more to come on the website. I'm also doing Inktober on my Instagram. It's Circworks, however you do the format that, just search Circworks on Inktober, you'll find it. And I wanted to thank the chat, specifically Robert Johnson, because I mean, earlier we had a lot of people and then kind of dropped off, but Robert stuck with us. So we appreciate that. Sorry we couldn't address all your comments. But yeah, so and again, I want to let you guys know the way this show works is that it kind of rotates between Josh's channel and my channel. So 1 week it'll be on mine, 1 week it'll be on Josh's, and then back to mine. So that can get a little confusing. So if you want to know exactly whose channel we're going to be on, and sometimes we do it at different times, different days, the best way to know when we're going to go live is to join our mailing list. And we don't spam you or anything. We just like to 30 minutes ahead of time send you a link, because YouTube doesn't always notify you when we go live. So if you want to always know when we are going to go live, then just join the mailing list. And there's also a link to there in the description as well. And so we will see you guys next week, where I don't know, we haven't talked to Corey, but we might want to continue our conversation on Josh's channel next week with Corey, if he's available, and talk about Vid Summit and just talk a little more about conferences, because like you heard here, I mean, we just there's so much to talk about. So we will see you guys next week. And yeah, that's it.
Bye.
See you guys.